Has it really been one full year since Set Point first went live? Indeed it has. What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. And today, Set Point turns 1 year old, which is absolutely amazing. So I couldn't believe it when I first saw it as well. But it has been a full year. Now, as for today's show, other than Set Point turning 1 year old, Syracuse, they pulled two upsets, not one, but two upsets over Pitt this past weekend. Are the Orange for real? And what happened to Pitt? Also, Notre Dame, they pulled off the upset against Louisville. The ACC is getting wild, everybody. Are the Fighting Irish for real? And am I always right? Or did Louisville just have an off night? And in the Big 12, we had Kansas of all teams, the basketball team. They pulled the upset special, and it was finger-licking good against Baylor. They beat Baylor in 5 sets. Did they take the second game for a clean sweep, or did Baylor salvage the split? And what are our matchups of the week for this week? All that and more here on Set Point. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you the 1 year anniversary edition of Set Point here on IESR Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome one, welcome all to another edition of Set Point. As you all know, my name is Teran Rodriguez. I'm going to be your host. And I'm just going to start by saying this. I can't believe it's been 1 year already. Yeah. So, honestly, I didn't think I'd be getting to 1 year this early. I mean, through 57 episodes, mind you. I couldn't believe it. So, yeah, it's... I don't really have the words to say. So, honestly, what I will say is this. I just want to thank, first and foremost, I want to thank everyone for continuing their support of Set Point. As I know a volleyball show isn't really the most popular thing out there, especially with football season being here. And as this show goes on, another show on iSports Radio is going live with 3 and Out, being hosted by the man, the myth, the legend, Larry B. And he is on StreamYard and YouTube. And he's also on Facebook as well. So, yeah, it's that. Yeah, a volleyball show having to compete with a football show. Not good odds for the volleyball show. But honestly, it's been a great 1 year. Like, a lot has happened in the 1 year when I first went live. Like, I remember when I first went live. My internet, the whole thing was a little choppy. I needed it, and to be honest, I didn't know what to really expect because I didn't really have a set out schedule on what to talk about when it came to Set Point. Because when it comes to volleyball, like when it comes to the NCAA, the main thing is the Power 5 conferences, and also the teams that are heavily favorited to win, like Stanford from last year. And also, I started Set Point like 3 weeks after the season began, which it wasn't really ideal for me on that part, but I'll probably be talking about more about how Set Point became to be. Still can't believe it's been 1 full year with 57 episodes in the books. Like the Set Point has had a lot of memorable episodes. Like the 50th episode was this past August, and then we had the season 2 premiere, which was a week ago, and then we have the 1 year anniversary special. And for those of you wondering why I'm not on Tuesdays, because 57 episodes 1 year later, this show is still kicking, especially with what's been going on with COVID. Like, when it comes to COVID, I didn't think this show was going to last too much. I didn't think this show was honestly going to last because there was no volleyball, and there was hardly any volleyball events. Like, the AVP only had like 3 tournaments in regards to beach volleyball, and there was no set start to the volleyball season. Like, I didn't even know that the Sun Belt Conference and some of these independent schools were starting. So, honestly, there was a lot of uncertainty when it came to set point going forward, especially in the summer, especially when everything got canceled, when it came to like high school volleyball, junior college men's volleyball, junior college beach volleyball, NCAA men's volleyball, NCAA beach volleyball, you name it. Everything got canceled, and it just felt like set point was going to be facing a grim future, and I thought it was going to have to take a hiatus, but fortunately for me, set point is still alive and kicking, and I couldn't be more happier with how I've survived with a full year. And I've had a lot of amazing guests in the past. I've had coaches, former players, former collegiate players who are now pro. Heck, I've even had a couple high school players and one of which won a national championship. So, honestly, it's been a great 1 year, and I want set point to continue to go on for as long as possible. So, before I actually take ourselves a quick little commercial break, we actually have some breaking news that I didn't get into last week because I didn't know of this news until after I went live. So, you know what this means. Volleyball music, volleyball news, we gotta cue the news music. So, the Big Ten has announced its volleyball date. Yes, I can't believe it. The Big Ten has announced its women's volleyball date. The first matchups for all Big Ten conference Big Ten teams will be January 22nd through April 25th. It was also the same day that, I believe it was the same day that all NCAA fall sports will be playing in the winter. And I even did a quick little write-up on it, which is pretty cool. But I also did hear about this, and it was really cool to hear that all the fall sports are now being played in the late winter / spring. This is a good and bad thing, honestly. It's good because all the fall sports will finally get to play, like women's volleyball, which is awesome, men's and women's soccer, cross country, men's water polo, the field hockey. The list goes on and on, honestly. However, it's a bad thing because for the women's volleyball players that play indoor and beach, they have to make the decision of, do they want to participate in beach season or do they want to partake in indoor season? It's gonna be tough to do both. Like, if there are games that don't coincide with one another when it comes to beach and indoor, then by all means, they should go for it. But if there isn't a way for them to, like, do both, like, you also have to factor in practices, too. Practices, team bonding moments, like, it's gonna be tough to do 2 practices in one day. And you also have to balance out classes as well, so it really is gonna be tough. So, I don't know, it's just food for thought on my part. So yeah, it's just for the NCAA women's volleyball players, like. And you also have to factor in that the women's indoor season could coincide with the men's indoor season. Like, we don't even know if there's going to be a men's season or not. But it is looking good that there is going to be an NCAA men's volleyball season, as well as a beach season. The only problem is for the women is that the women could more than likely be using the gym, and then for the spring sports, it's basically not. They basically could have to, like, reschedule their games to the point where one team is playing on a certain day and the other team is playing on another day. Or they could just do double headers, but that's kind of tricky right there. I think 4 p.m. it would have to be like 4 p.m. Pacific time to like 7 p.m. Pacific time. And still, like, if a match goes 3 hours, that's a sticky situation. Like, 2 hours is pushing it. Like, 3 hours is just banana loopies. So I don't see how that's going to work out. Like, maybe it could work out if there's a doubleheader, but I don't know. And then I also got word that the NCAA has shrunk its NCAA tournament field from 64 to 48. So I think I talked about this last week, but honestly, it's going to make it tough for teams to actually get in. Like, there's not a whole lot of at-large bids. Like, everyone's going to need to play their A game. Like, we could have some of the best teams miss the postseason because there weren't enough at-large spots. It's like high school volleyball. Like, sometimes you have to apply as an at-large team, and you might not get in. But you could also make the argument for all high school sports, especially in California. Like, there are some teams that are really good on paper, but they don't get into the postseason because there aren't a whole lot of at-large spots. Like, the whole size of the tournament just isn't there. You have to factor in strength of schedule and strength of schedule points and all that, and league requirements like the top X amount of teams get into the postseason and whatnot. So that's just me. Again, it's just more food for thought on my part. It's just me and my curiosity, just wondering. But honestly, I think this is good that the NCAA finally got a date down for the NCAA fall sports. It could be tricky for volleyball because they're pretty much going to be coinciding with basketball and men's volleyball unless they push men's volleyball even further into the season, later into the sports calendar, which that would not be convenient, honestly. And then you also have to factor in like who can get in and who can't get in. Like, are they going to have like limited capacity, or are they going to have maximum capacity, or whatnot? And again, it's just food for thought and just my 2 cents. Like, there's still a lot of questions that need to be answered. And like, will you be having fans or will you not be having fans? And you also have to wonder, will you be live streaming games and whatnot? So, I don't know. So, just my 2 cents. So, I think that's, but that's pretty much the NCAA news that I had missed last week. Just gotta get that out of the way. And it's good that we will be knowing that there will be Big Ten volleyball. Pac-12 will eventually be following suit. Both of those conferences will be having or fall football, which kind of makes me wonder. I wish they could have done the same with their other fall sports, but it is what it is. At least they have a set date for everything going on. Because if not, then we'd still be having many questions on why football gets to come back, but not the other sports. I know football is the most popular sport that everyone's going to want to go to, but you gotta show some love for the other fall sports. So, just my little take. So, I think we're actually going to take ourselves a quick little commercial break. When we get back, it is time to break down some upsets that happened this past weekend, aka from the ACC and from the Big 12 and from some of the other conferences. But it's just mainly the ACC and Big 12. I don't think anything else was a shocker, honestly. So you're listening to Set Point, the 1-year anniversary edition, here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Lay down music,
Hey, what's up, BS3 sports fans? If you love listening to the BS3 Sports Show, check out the weekend wrap-up every Monday at 12:15 Central Time, 1:15 Eastern, recapping the weekend in sports like you never heard it before. Comedy, interactive chat room, it's a must-listen. Weekend wrap-up on Spreaker.com. Part of the X Squad. Check it out. You won't be disappointed.
Attention, all sports fans! If you're someone who wakes up each morning with lists of sporting events to go along with your to-do list for the day, then you just might be a diehard. The world of sports is as vast as the ocean is deep, including the major leagues, the minor leagues, the college, and everything in between. This is me, your brother Larry B of IE Sports Radio, welcoming you to join me every Monday evening at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern on The Defining Moment, a show that focuses on what really matters in the sports world sports themselves and nothing outside of them. Once again, tune in for The Defining Moment with me, your boy Larry B, every Monday evening at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern on IE Sports Radio, right here on Spreaker.com. We'll see you there.
All right, everybody, we are back with Set Point here on IE Sports Radio. I appreciate everyone that's tuning in. Those were a couple of our drops from a couple of our shows. Well, not from our shows. Like, the first one was not from our show. The first one was from our sister station, BS3 Radio, and that was the voice of Mr. Ben Suttereth. And it was really cool, and he does a great job with his little show. And the other one was The Defining Moment with Larry B, as he is hosting his show, 3 and Out. So, unfortunately, he can't be in the chat room today, but I'm sure. I just popped by in his chat room on StreamYard, or Facebook/YouTube, and just said, hi, what's up, and because I'm a good guy. So, now without any further delay, let us get in to our first upset from this past weekend. It is time to sound the thunder and hit the applause button. Alright, so our first upset, now this one wasn't, we'll go to the ACC, because they had a lot of upsets this past weekend. I wouldn't necessarily call this an upset, considering I thought this was kind of expected, but in terms of this team versus that team, it was considered an upset. So the first upset on the upset menu was Miami taking down Georgia Tech. Now, for those of you that don't know, Georgia Tech was the winner of the NIVC, the National Invitational Volleyball Championship, which is basically like the NIT in volleyball, or in women's volleyball. They don't have that in men's volleyball, which is kind of sad, but whatever. Just because there's not a whole lot of NCAA men's volleyball teams. Like, you could make a whole tournament with that. You could make at least a 16-team bracket with that, but that's for another day. So, the University of Miami, the Miami Hurricanes, the U, managed to pull off an upset over Georgia Tech, last year's NIVC winner. So, last Friday, Miami won in 5 sets. Funny thing is that Miami actually took the first 2 sets. The first set was won 25-17. The second was won 25-20. It looked like Miami was just on this. They were determined to win, man. I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't. I was very surprised. I thought Miami. I think Miami is so underrated. I think Miami is a talented team, and they have some good up-and-coming talent, and they have one player in particular that I'm very high on. Before I continue on, I actually do need to go over the ACC Volleyball preseason coaches pool. So, we'll go down the list from 1 through 15. So, the number 1 team that the coaches voted for first place was Pitt, with 192 points and 11 first-place votes. That's not surprising. Pitt had a great year last year. Unfortunately, they only made it to the second round of the NCAA tournament. Then they lost in the second round, and Pitt went undefeated. And Pitt returns a lot of their talented players, such as Kayla Lund and the girl who I can't pronounce for squat diddly. It's Chinaza Ndi. I believe that's her name. So Pitt is definitely a good, talented team, and they also have a good middle, too. So Pitt, I can understand being the number 1 team in the preseason poll. Number 2 is Louisville. Louisville had an outstanding year last year. They made it all the way to the Sweet 16. They upset number 2 seed Texas, and they do return a good chunk of their team from last year. And this is definitely one of Louisville's stronger teams. One of their talented players that they return is Iko Jones, along with Anna Stevenson and Claire Chowsey. I believe that's how her name is pronounced. So Louisville earned 175 points and 2 first-place votes. Number 3 was very close, right behind Louisville. It was Georgia Tech with 172 points and 2 first-place votes. I kind of don't understand how Georgia Tech got 2 first-place votes. Maybe Georgia Tech returns a lot of players, and we are all just too focused on Pitt and Louisville to see that Georgia Tech is also in the name as well. So Pitt, Louisville, and Georgia accounted for all 15 of the first-place votes. Pitt had 11, while Louisville and Georgia Tech had 2 apiece. Number 4 was Notre Dame, who had 158 points. Number 5 was Florida State with 145 points. Number 6 was Syracuse with 126 points. Number 7 is North Carolina with 121 points. Number 8 is Boston College, who had or a tie for number 8 is Boston College and Miami, who each had 89 points. Number 10 was Duke with 82 points. Number 11 was North Carolina State with 70 points. Number 12 was Clemson with 68 points. Number 13 was Virginia with 42 points. Number 14 was Wake Forest with 28 points. And rounding up the bottom of the ACC preseason coaches poll was Virginia Tech with 18 points. Now back to Georgia Tech and Miami. So the reason why Georgia Tech losing to Miami is considered an upset is because Miami, no one really expected Miami to do that good. I think everyone expected Miami to be competitive, but not up there in terms of talent. I personally disagree. I think Miami is a talented team. They have a lot of talented players, such as Elizaveta Lukianova. Oh, God. A lot of these players have some interesting first names. She had 23 kills in the win over Georgia Tech. Another player that Miami has is Angela Grieve, who had 14 kills. She was impressive. Janet Kalaniavalu had 13 kills, and she hit 312. Now, the next player I'm about to read off, is the player that I am high on, and that I think can really make a big difference to this Miami team. Lauren Tarnoff. She played all 5 sets. She's only a freshman, mind you, and she had 11 kills, and she hit 364. She only had 3 errors, which is pretty good. Not bad for a freshman. Now, the reason why I'm so high on Lauren Tarnoff is because she had an outstanding senior year at Mater Dei High School last year, and she is the daughter of Robin Tarnoff, who played at the University of Pacific back in the day, and she also played overseas. And I also like Lauren Tarnoff's story. Like, her junior year when she went to Mater Dei, she blew out her ACL, and despite this, Mater Dei won the whole national championship last year. Despite this, it was tough for Lauren because she didn't get to do a whole lot, and it was very sad because she had to flip her recruiting process because a lot of the teams that had her on their radar kind of had to drop her because of that little issue, which that's very sad to have an ACL injury derail your junior year, which was the year that your high school team won the NCAA, or not NCAA, what the heck, the high school championship. For California's sake, it's the California Interscholastic Federation Southern Section Championship. And this wasn't winning. Both those were in the highest division. So as for Lauren, she didn't get I think she only got to play in one game, and then that was it. Like, after that one game, she blew out. I don't know the whereabouts of how she sustained the injury, but it was sad. Like, it's never fun to blow out your ACL and miss the whole season. And then, like I said, she flipped her recruiting process. She had to reset from stage 1 all the way up, and eventually she committed to Miami on her birthday, which is cool. So, and then eventually she turned out to be a really darn good volleyball player and a great middle blocker for Mater Dei. So, honestly, and one thing I like about Lauren is that I like her determination. Like, she said she wants to prove all of the other colleges that dropped her off their radar after she blew out her ACL wrong, and I like that determination. It's not like when Josh Rosen said after he got passed on by 9 other teams that the other 9 were mistakes. Like, it wasn't like that. It was being humble and hungry, which that is the key to having success. So, other than that, Lauren also made goals for herself. She wants to be on the ACC freshman team, and I honestly can make the argument that Lauren could have been the ACC Freshman of the Week this week. Had it not been for another player who had another big game for another ACC team in another upset, Lauren probably would have been Freshman of the Week. But that's not the case. But there's still plenty of time. Like, this is only week 1, like, of the ACC. Week 2 could have a certain type of optimism for Miami, because sure they went 1-1, spoiler alert, but they did it against one of the better teams in their conference. So as for Georgia Tech, which lost in that first game, they were led by Michaela Dowd, who had 22 kills. She hit 391 and took 46 swings. Jiminy Christmas. Also leading the way for Georgia Tech was Mariana Brambilla, who had 16 kills. She had 6 errors, though, but that's all right. And then also being a leader in the kill department was Julia Bergman, who had 14 kills, hit 225. Not too impressive, but it's okay. Maddie Tippett and Brambilla each had 16 kills. Or not 16 kills, 16 digs. In terms of digs for Miami, Priscilla Hernandez had 23 digs, while Kyla Nivalu had 11 digs, and Savannah Vach had 11 digs as well. Now, interesting thing for Georgia Tech, they shuffled liberos after the first set. Like, Paola Laborda was the libero for set 1, but I don't know what happened. I don't know if she got hurt or if the coach just wanted to flip the script, but we got to see Maddie Tippett at libero, according to the NCAA box score. And the one stat that kind of stood out to me in terms of this match was the overall blocks. Miami outblocked Georgia Tech 10-5. Now that's pretty impressive, if you ask me. Or as Al Michaels once said, "Now that's overwhelming." I totally butchered that, but it's whatever. Savannah Vach also chipped in 56 assists along with her 11 digs, while Maddie McKissock had 53 assists for Georgia Tech. So honestly, that was a very impressive win for Miami of Florida, aka the U. And I also gotta give a big shout to Ben Suttereth himself, aka BS3 Radio. Thanks for dropping by in the chat room on the 1-year anniversary of Set Point. I definitely appreciate you taking time out of your day. It really means a lot, man, and you're one of the reasons why Set Point is always successful. You're just in time for me to talk about the upset that Miami had pulled this past Friday against Georgia Tech. I was quite impressed with this upset, and I was also impressed how Lauren Tarnoff did, and I know her, and I told her, and I personally think that she is one of the strongest people I've met. Like, to come back from an ACL injury your junior year, to have a big senior year in high school, and to make a big impact as a freshman in your first game is amazing. And more importantly, she definitely got all of her moves, her skill set from her mother, because her mother also played middle blocker when she was at the University of Pacific. So that's big stuff for Lauren Tarnoff. I definitely think she has the potential to be a part of the ACC freshman team. So I think the sky's the limit for Lauren. Now, as for the second game between Georgia Tech and Miami, the two teams met together on Saturday, and Georgia Tech managed to get revenge over Miami, beating them in 5 sets. First set was 25-20 Miami. Second set was 25-17 Georgia Tech. Third set was 25-20 Miami. Fourth set was 25-23 Georgia Tech. And then the fifth set was 15-11 Georgia Tech. And they managed to avenge their loss. Now, Georgia Tech's blocking was so much better in that game. They had 14 blocks as opposed to Miami's 11. If you block better, you're going to get results like that. If you block like the way Georgia Tech did in that first game against Miami, it's going to be a rather tragic ending. And big shout to Andrew Hagenbaugh, who's popped in the chat room. Thanks for tuning in, man. Definitely appreciate you. And a big shout to you who just relaunched the Soccer Scoreboard show. Great show this past Sunday. Appreciate you taking time in the chat room. So back to Miami and Georgia Tech Part 2. Julia Bergman led the way for Georgia Tech with 20 kills. She took 59 swings, which is basically like a shot attempt or a pass from a quarterback. And then Mariana Brambilla had 18 kills. She hit 400. That's the statistic that stands out to me. She hit 400, which is basically 40%, which is a pretty high percentage despite what anyone says. Like, when you're hitting in like the 300s to 400s, that's a very good sign that you were efficient. You were very efficient. So, good stuff on Brambilla's part. And then Michaela Dowd had 11 kills. She only hit 143, but she was the third highest kill leader for Georgia Tech. Now, as for Miami, they were led by Elizaveta Lukianova, who had 28 kills. She did take 60 swings, but she hit 350, which is pretty impressive. So I was pretty impressed by her. My only negative for her is that she had 7 errors, which that's kind of a little underwhelming. So then we have Angela Grieve, who had 15 kills on 44 attempts. She also had 6 hitting errors. Like, hitting errors were kind of a problem for both teams, as both teams totaled 23. So that's kind of a little concerning for both teams. Funny thing is that both teams had the same amount of hitting errors in both matches. Both teams had 19 hitting errors in the first match, and both teams had 23 hitting errors in the second match. And I'm probably going to mispronounce this name. Janice Leo had 12 kills on 25 attempts for a hitting percentage of .320. Lauren Tarnoff, the little prodigy that I'm high on, had 8 kills on 13 attempts for a .462 hitting percentage, which is the highest of all the players that took a swing. So that's kind of impressive. It's not as good as her first game, but you're going to have your ups and downs. Like, it's maybe the problem for Georgia Tech was that they didn't zone in on Lauren a whole lot. So, Andrew says, "Thank you, sir, and happy to listen. You're doing an amazing job, and your work slowed down, so I had some time to tune in." Hey, great to hear. Keep on working hard, man, and hopefully your phone doesn't get taken away. So, so anyway, back to the match. In terms of assists, now this was interesting. Georgia Tech ran a 6-2 offense. They ran 2 setters. Isabella D'Amico had 40 assists, while Maddie McKissock had 15 assists. I don't know what that was. Maybe Georgia Tech ran a 6-2 offense, which is basically 2 setters. Which, if that's the case, then that might have been the reason why Miami got thrown off. And then in terms of digs, they had 4 players in terms of it reached double digits in digs. They had Maddie Tippett, who was making her first career start, with 22 digs. They had Julia Bergman have 18 digs. They had Michaela Dowd, who had 14 digs, and Mariana Brambilla had 12 digs as well. So they, as a team, Georgia Tech had 76 digs, which is darn right impressive. As for Miami, they also had 4 players reach double digits in kills. They were anchored in terms of defense by Priscilla Hernandez, who had 16 digs. Emily Damon and Janet Kalaniauvalu each had 12 digs, and Savannah Vach had 10 digs. So Savannah Vach had a double-double in both of her games, which is pretty impressive. It's kind of to be expected, considering when a match goes 5, your stats are going to be high. If not, then it's an error-filled match. The thing that stood out to me in the second match was that Georgia Tech outdug Miami by 9. That's going to help you win games, especially when you're also out-blocking the other team as well. So I think that was a big win for Georgia Tech. They couldn't afford to be 0-2. Otherwise, that would have been all bad news. But definitely do watch out for Miami. Miami is definitely a good team. I think that team can go far, and that they're not to be slept on. So now let's go on to upset number 2 of the ACC. We had Notre Dame and Louisville. Now, I don't think Notre Dame beating Louisville should be considered an upset. I talked last week on how talented Notre Dame is and how they return a majority of their players from last year. You have a lot of their players returning from last year, such as Charlie Niego, Caroline Muth, Sydney Bent. And those are their 3 kill leaders that amassed 300 or 1,000 kills combined this past season. And Notre Dame is hungry this year, and their hunger showed when they swept Louisville at Louisville. If it was at Notre Dame, I wouldn't be overly surprised, but at Louisville, getting a sweep, and with how they won, was very impressive. So when it came to the first set, Notre Dame won 27-25. Notre Dame actually had to dig their way out of that set because they were trailing for the most part until they caught Louisville in the latter part of the set and eventually took that set. Second set was also close. Louisville jumped out to an early lead. Notre Dame chipped away at it and then eventually won set 2, 25-22. And then the third set was 26-24, another tug-of-war set until Notre Dame pulled away and won the match, which was very impressive. Charlie Niego led the way for Notre Dame with 11 kills. Caroline Muth had 10 kills. Aubrey Hamilton had 8 kills, and Lindsay Miller had 7 kills. Like, when it comes to a sweep, your stats are not going to be that high. Like, don't be surprised if those statistics aren't that high. Zoe Nunez chipped in a double-double with 32 assists and 10 digs, while Hattie Monson is a name you're going to want to write down, because I'll be talking about her in a little bit. Hattie Monson, a freshman libero, totaled 20 digs. Now that is the way to start your NCAA campaign. I was surprised she actually got some time for Notre Dame, because Notre Dame actually had another one of their dig leaders return from last year. That was, looking at the Madison Cruzado was the one that graduated from last year. So I'm surprised they went with a freshman over Kiara Schmidt, who almost had 200 digs from last year. So I was very impressed with how Notre Dame decided to roll the dice with the freshman libero, and she came up big. And you're definitely going to be hearing a little bit more about Hattie Monson in a little bit. So just keep that in mind, okay? So as for Louisville in the loss, they actually had a good balanced attack. They had Aiko Jones with 13 kills, Anna Stevenson, who had 12 kills, Claire Chelsea had 10 kills, and Anna DeBeer, she is a freshman, and I believe she comes from Assumption High School in Kentucky. She had 6 kills, so that's pretty cool. Tori Dilfer, the returning setter, had 36 assists and 9 digs, almost a double-double. Alexis Hamilton had 23 digs, which was good in the loss. Unfortunately, Notre Dame, with the amount of returners they have, are very talented. I think this Notre Dame team can make waves in the ACC. Everyone is focused on Pitt and Louisville, but they forgot all about one team that returned a lot of their starters from last year, Notre Dame. And I think that Notre Dame team can creep up on some teams and possibly win the ACC, because it's a shortened season. Like, not everyone's going to face everyone. And I don't think Notre Dame plays Pitt this year in terms of the shortened season. So So just my little take, and but I think Notre Dame is making waves, and I think this Notre Dame team is gonna be something to watch for as the season progresses. I'm just gonna double check the Google Docs sheet that I was sent on if Notre Dame does play Pitt. They actually do play Pitt, so that's gonna be very interesting because I'm gonna be getting into Pitt a little bit later. Now, for those of you that don't know, the conference play this time around, it's basically a two matches in 2 days. Like, take for example Notre Dame and Louisville. They were supposed to play on Friday, and I think they were actually supposed to play on Sunday. I'm not sure. Maybe they were supposed to play Saturday. I'm not 100% sure. But their second game, the second game between Notre Dame and Louisville, it got canceled. It got canceled, and unfortunately, the two were unable to play their second match. And I don't even know if it's going to be made up, which is a huge problem. If Notre Dame and Louisville aren't going to be making that matchup, this begs me to wonder what's going to happen if Notre Dame. Okay, let's say this. Let's say Notre Dame goes 7-0. They run the table. They're 7-0. They're undefeated. Let's say another team. Let's go with Florida State. Let's say Florida State has a big season and they run the table. But here's the thing about Florida State. They have 6 games this year when it comes to ACC play. They have Georgia Tech, Miami, and Wake Forest. That's only 6 games, considering they're going to be playing each of those games twice. What's going to happen if Florida State beats all those teams, goes 6-0, and then, let's say, Notre Dame goes 7-0? How are they going to base the tiebreaker off that? That's a huge problem right there. Like, the ACC has got to find a way to make up those games, considering if they don't, a lot of scenarios are going to be arisen, and a lot of coaches are going to be asking a bunch of questions. And I don't know. Like, I don't know, man. Like, I was going to use the example of Georgia Tech, or let's say Duke manages to run the table. Like, and Duke has the same thing as well. Like, Duke has only 6 games. Like, I don't know if they're just cutting back games because of the pandemic, but it's a little concerning if you ask me. So, honestly, I don't know. Like, maybe they're just cutting games because of reasons. But if that's the case, then what game are they going to cut for in terms of Notre Dame? Like, are they just going to play one opponent later in the latter part of this season? Because every team except for Georgia Tech has 6 games left. But for Notre Dame, they have 6 games left after they played just 1, and then teams like Florida State haven't even started their season, have only 6 games. So I'm assuming those games will probably be made up in 2021, considering that the NCAA women's volleyball season is going to run from January all the way to April. So I don't know, man. I don't know. So anyway, back to the Louisville Notre Dame game. So Notre Dame, a couple of stats that jumped out to me in terms of the Notre Dame Louisville matchup. Louisville outdug Notre Dame 50-45, but they lost, which is kind of surprising. In terms of hitting errors, they weren't too far off from one another. Like, I think what happened was that Notre Dame showed a lot of their grit and resilience, and that's kind of what hurt Louisville. I think Louisville could have won the first set. Like, the first set is what killed a lot of Louisville's momentum. Like, if they take that first set, it's a little bit of a smoother matchup going forward. But that wasn't the case, and Louisville just lost at their home court, which it's a little disappointing if you're Louisville, but there's still plenty of games left. Like, there's a lot of season left, and I don't think Louisville has too much to be worried about. They may need some help, but honestly, who's to say? So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. We'll see. We shall see how it goes for them. But as for Notre Dame, I'm glad Notre Dame is showing that they deserve to be amongst some of the best in the NCAA, which I'll be talking about the AVCA coaches poll a little later. So that's the Notre Dame Louisville game. Now for the big upset this past weekend, or upsets. Syracuse beating Pitt. Keep in mind, Syracuse was voted 6th to finish 6th in the ACC, while Pitt was voted to finish 1st, which is no surprise. But Syracuse beat Pitt not once this weekend, but twice. Very impressive stuff by Syracuse. So the first matchup, Syracuse had to grind it out against Pitt, winning the first match in 5 sets. The first set was 25-21 Pitt. The second set was 25-17 Syracuse. The second set was somewhat of a marathon, as Syracuse was leading throughout the most part of the set, and then Pitt managed to come back to tie it at 24 apiece, and then Cuse ran off 2 points to take the third set, 26-24. Set 4 was kind of the same exact thing, as Syracuse was the one that led for the most part in set 4, and then Pitt managed to make a late comeback to win set 4 27-25, and then set 5, Syracuse had all the momentum within them as they took the 5th set 15-9, and they pulled off the upset. Keep in mind that is Pitt's first ACC loss since 2018 when they lost to Duke. Honestly, that's darn right impressive for Syracuse. I didn't think Pitt had it in them. So looking at the statistics, we had Paulina Shemanova, who had 20 kills, while Ella Sada had 13 kills. Shemanova also took 54 swings, but she had 8 errors, which was kind of the underwhelming part, but I can let it pass. Abby Cassiano had 12 kills, and she only had 1 error. That's what stood out to me. She was consistent, and she only had 1 error, and she hit 550 as a result, so good on ya. And Mariana Markova had 11 kills, and she hit 333, took only 21 swings, and had only 4 errors. So, pretty good stuff right there. Pretty good stuff. So, as for Pitt, they had 4 players in terms of double-digit kills, led by Chinaza D, who had 21 kills. The big thing that stood out from her is that she only had 1 error, and she had 51 swings. She hit 392 as a whole, so that was the impressive thing. That is one of the reasons why she is one of the top players that return for Pitt, and that is the reason why Pitt is chosen to be the ACC champion. But after this loss, I don't know. So anyway, other than D, we had Kayla Lund, who had 16 kills. The problem with Lund, however, was that she had 9 errors. That screamed bloody murder to me, and that to me was one of the reasons why Pitt lost. And that is a problem right there. When one of your top players has 9 hitting errors, you're in for a rough ride. Zoe Faki and Sabrina Starks each had 10 kills. They both had 2 hitting errors, and they both almost had the same number of attempts. Faki had 308, while Starks had a hitting percentage of 348. As for assists, it looks like Pitt ran a 6-2 offense. Lexis Akio had 32 assists, while Kylie Levers had 20 assists, which I'm surprised Pitt ran a 6-2 offense and they lost. Maybe it was the first time Pitt ran a 6-2 offense, because running a 6-2 offense would throw any team for a loop. Now, as for Syracuse, they just ran the standard 5-1 offense with Elena Karakasi, who had 51 assists. Karakasi added 9 digs, while Lauren Hogan had 21 digs, and Paulina Shemanova chipped in 18 digs, which is pretty good. So she almost had a 20-20 night with 20 kills and 18 digs. As for Pitt, now Pitt had the interesting dig situation. They were led in digs by their outside hitter, Kayla Lund, who had 16 digs. Zoe Faki had 13 digs, and those are their only 2 players that reached double digits in digs. Now, they shuffled their lineup in terms of libero. I don't know what happened, but Mariha Popovich was the libero for Pitt in set number through sets 1 through 3, while Ashi Browski was the libero in sets 4 through 5, which I don't know. Popovich had 9 digs, while Browski had 7 digs. I don't know if there was an injury, or if someone got hurt, or something like that, but I'm not going to assume. Maybe the coach just shuffled the lineup just because one wasn't getting the job done, the other wanted to prove her worth and whatnot. So I didn't know. So I can't really answer the question on why they went with 2 liberos in the different parts of the set or different parts of the match. But it's whatever to me. So honestly, that was a bad loss for Pitt. Like, you can't lose games like that. If you're going to have a deep run in the NCAA tournament, you cannot have your best player having 9 hitting errors. That's a big fat no-no. As a team, Pitt hit 250 while Syracuse hit 269. Now, the blocks were kind of overwhelming as well. Syracuse had 13 blocks while Pitt had 8. And that's not going to get the job done for Pitt. Like, when you're getting out-blocked and when you're getting out-hit, and when one of your star players is having a bad night, you're not going to win games. And also Syracuse outdug Pitt 71-67. Okay, that wasn't too much, but still. I think Pitt had a lot of identity problems. Like, I don't know if shuffling their libero lineup was the best idea, but I don't know. I don't know, man. So, I think it was very disappointing on Pitt's part that they lost. I'm not trying to take anything away from Syracuse. Syracuse won that game. But Pitt, when you're the reigning ACC champion, and you're trying to make your name be known, and you're trying to have redemption from last year, you gotta win those games. Like, you gotta win those ACC games, because in order to make the NCAA tournament, you have to be conference champion, or you have to make your state case for being in the NCAA tournament, because there are 16 automatic qualifying spots, while the other 16 are at-larges. So, if it's losses like that could come back to haunt Pitt. So, that was the first game between Pitt and Syracuse. The second game was a lot shorter, and let's just say that it did not favor Pitt at all, as Syracuse swept Pitt. You are listening to that correctly. Syracuse swept Pitt. Now, it was at Syracuse, but I don't care. Like, Pitt can win anywhere. Like, if Pitt honestly could win at any place, anytime, anywhere. Syracuse won the first set 25-21. Syracuse won the second set 27-25 after it was a dogfight in that set. And then Syracuse had all the momentum from set 2 and carried it over to set 3 and won that set 25-19, giving Pitt the double sweep, and them moving 2-0 in conference and 2-0 overall. As we get Marcus Los Great jump in the chat room, I appreciate you coming live, sir. Thank you for joining. Definitely want to give a shout out to Marcus. He's one of the primary listeners when it comes to Set Point, and he and I are like brothers. Like, when it comes... Yeah, Marcus says we are running multiple shows at the same time or something. It's only going to be for this week, because today is the 1-year anniversary of Set Point, and I kind of want to do it on today. I didn't expect 3 and Out to go live today, honestly. I thought I was supposed to go live tomorrow, but I don't know. I'm not going to get into that. So, but I definitely do want to tell Marcus this, if you're listening. I definitely do appreciate all of the times you've tuned into Set Point. Like, I know you may not be the best, most knowledgeable at volleyball, but I really do appreciate you tuning in. Like, and I definitely appreciate tuning into your show as well, because as you said, we're brothers, and I wouldn't want to have it any other way. So just gotta give that little shout out to you, Marcus. So, but yeah, definitely do appreciate you and the others tuning in to Set Point. So, as for the Syracuse Pitt game part 2, this was kind of a balanced effort on Syracuse's part. Syracuse did not have one player that reached 10 plus kills in terms of the match. They had a balanced attack. They had Mariana Markova, Ella Sada, and Polina Shemenova each have 8 kills, while Yulia Yastrub and Abby Cassiano each had 6 kills. The team hit 311 overall, and they only had 12 errors, which when you're not going to be seeing a whole lot of those statistics, considering it was a short match. Like, when it comes to sweeps, like, they're not going to be a whole lot of there's not going to be a whole lot of statistics jumping out at you. So as for Pitt, they were led by Kayla Lund, who had 19 kills and only 1 hitting error, which that's a much better outing from her. She also hit .562. That's the Kayla Lund Pitt needs every night. If Pitt can have that Kayla Lund, Pitt is so much better. Now, the other thing that kind of stood out to me in the worst way was Chinaza D, who had only 5 kills and 3 hitting errors, and she had 23 hitting attempts and a hitting percentage of .087 or 87. In other words, less than 8%, which is very now that is concerning right there. That is very concerning. And Marcus asks, is this the first time Syracuse has been ranked nationally? Probably. Like, I'm going to get into the AVCA top 15 a little later. And I say the words top 15 instead of top 25 because not everyone is playing. The SEC hasn't started, the Big 12 or the Big 10, the Big 12 just recently started, the Big 10 and the Pac-12 start next year, and the list goes on and on. Not a whole lot of these teams, but it probably is the first time Syracuse has been ranked nationally because especially since we're going to be getting into where Syracuse is when it comes to the AVCA coaches poll. But this was a huge weekend for Syracuse. Their big test, however, is a road trip to South Bend when they play Notre Dame. So honestly, I really am looking forward to that Notre Dame Syracuse matchup. Like this could answer a lot of questions for Syracuse and for Notre Dame. Can Notre Dame take down another team that had a big weekend? And can Syracuse build off of their 2 big wins over Pitt? So, honestly, we'll have to see. So, as for Pitt, they had no player that reached double digits in digs, which is a problem. But they did have a balanced effort in digs. Kayla Lund had 9 digs. Mariha Popovich had 7 digs. Ashley Broski had 7 digs, and she was the libero for that game. And as for assists-wise, they still ran their 6-2 offense. They had Kylie Levers that had 24 assists, and Lexus Akio, who had 17 assists as well. As for Syracuse, they had 2 players that reached double digits in digs, with Lauren Hogan having 15 digs as the libero, and Polina Shemanova had 10 digs as the outside hitter. So what she lacked in terms of kills, she made up for in digs, which is pretty impressive. And also, Yulia Yastrub had 8 digs as well. So that's pretty good on her part. Alina Karakasi had 36 assists, which was also good. So to me, I think Syracuse really proved to everyone that they are not to be underestimated. The funny thing is that Pitt actually outblocked Syracuse 7-4.5, but they still lost. So that means, overall, this begs me to wonder, what the heck was Pitt doing? Like, did they have themselves a little bit of an ACC hangover from last year? And then Syracuse, to me, proved that the ACC is one tough conference and that no team is safe, especially in 2020. So, again, I'm looking forward to that Notre Dame Syracuse clash. So, I definitely think that it's going to be a fun time going forward. So, before we get into the Big 12 that had an upset, we're actually going to jump into the AVCA coaches poll, and it's kind of a good part to talk about this coaches poll, as this is only the week 1 coaches poll. So let's go down from 15 through 11. Number 15 is Texas State, and all these teams weren't ranked because there was no coaches poll. So number 15 is Texas State. Number 14 is Duke, who went 2-0 in ACC play last year. Or this year. 13 is Iowa State. 12 is Georgia Tech. And Louisville is number 11. 10 through 6, we've got Pitt at number 10. Kansas at number 9. Texas A&M, who hasn't even started play yet. The SEC won't be starting play until October. So just so you know. So Texas A&M is number 8, Missouri is number 7, and Notre Dame is number 6. And 5 through 1, number 5 is Syracuse. Number 4 is Florida, who also hasn't started play yet. Number 3 is Kentucky, which also hasn't started play yet. Number 2 is Baylor, who managed to garner 1 first-place vote. And your number 1 team in the AVCA Coaches Poll of September 30th is Texas, who went 2-0 last week with 2 big wins at Oklahoma. So, again, this could be Texas's year. So now that we are in the Big 12, that's a good segue to go into another upset that happened this past weekend. We had Kansas the basketball school, the Jayhawks, Rock Chalk, pull off a huge upset against Baylor. They beat Baylor in 5. I could not believe it. It's like Kansas, isn't that the place that is known for making hot wings, according to Shaquille O'Neal? Don't answer that. So, anyway, Kansas pulled off a big upset against Baylor on Friday. So Kansas won in 5 sets. Baylor took the first set 25-19. Kansas blew Baylor out of the water in set 2, 25-13. Then Kansas won set 3, 25-22. Baylor won set 4, 25-19, and then Kansas took the 5th set 15-9, which if you're Baylor, you cannot afford losses like that. You cannot afford to lose to a team like Kansas, because now you're behind the 8 ball with Texas winning both of their games at Oklahoma, which means Texas has a leg up on them, and they are in the driver's seat to taking the Big 12 championship. So you kind of have to be concerned if you're Baylor. And if you're Kansas, you have a lot of confidence going forward into this week's matchup against Texas. Now, the second matchup between Baylor and Kansas was actually to be expected. Baylor swept Kansas, and I'm not going to really get too much into that just because it was to be expected. If Baylor had lost, I would have gone more in-depth into that. But to me, I expected Baylor to bounce back, because if they went 0-2 this past week against Kansas, the basketball school, that would have been hugely, hugely concerning for Baylor, because Baylor, to me, is basically the front runner along with Texas to winning the Big 12 championship. Now, Baylor losing wasn't too much of a concern for me. How Baylor lost is the big concern to me. Baylor's best player, Yasonia Presley, had only had 33 attempts, but only had 9 kills, and she had a whopping 11 hitting errors for a hitting percentage of negative 61. If that doesn't scream concern, I don't know what does. How is the reigning AVCA player of the year have 9 kills, 11 hitting errors, and only a hitting percentage of negative 61? Like, if you're Baylor, you got to be wondering what the heck just went wrong with her. As for the kill leaders for Baylor, Lauren Harrison led the way with 15 kills and a hitting percentage of .323. Cara McGee had 12 kills, only 1 hitting error for a hitting percentage of .550. And Marquis Vandermark had 14 kills with a hitting percentage of .320. She did have 6 hitting errors. Now, here's the thing about Baylor's hitting errors. Baylor had 26 hitting errors. Do you want to know how much Kansas had? Anybody? I will give you all 15 seconds to figure that out. Okay, time's up. That was a little bit more than 15 seconds, but do you want to know how many hitting errors Kansas had? Kansas had 14 hitting errors to Baylor's 26. 14 hitting errors. Baylor being one of the reigning co-Big 12 champion and a semifinalist in last year's NCAA tournament had 12 more hitting errors than Kansas. I don't even think Kansas made the NCAA tournament last year. I just don't understand how Kansas had such a hardly error-free night, and then Baylor just had the worst night of all. I get this was both teams had to jump into conference play, and there was no non-conference games, but Baylor, you have the reigning ABCA Player of the Year on your team. I don't know if Kansas had the perfect game plan for her, but Kansas, Baylor, what are you doing, Baylor? You're lucky you're still number 2, and you're lucky you didn't lose twice to Kansas. Otherwise, you'd be going down further from that top 15. So, as for the other statistic leaders on Baylor, Callie Williams had 47 assists, while in terms of digs, Emily Van Slate had 9 digs, while Yesenia Presley had 9 digs to go with those 9 kills. I still can't believe she had 9 kills, so I don't know. So I'm a little concerned for Baylor. That first game really had me wondering. It's how did this happen? The funny part is that Baylor actually outdug Kansas 36-33, which I'll be getting into Kansas' stats now, which Kansas was led by Ainadi, who had 16 kills, Jenny Mosser had 14 kills, and Caroline Crawford and Aneska Zabo had 10 kills apiece. Sarah Nielsen had 44 assists, while in terms of digs, they were led by Molly Schultz, who had 13 digs. This wasn't a big digging match between both of those teams. I want to say both. I couldn't believe how many digs that both teams had. That's not really a high number. So I don't know if it was just an off night in terms of digs or whatnot. But either way, I'm a little surprised at what went on with this matchup. There wasn't a whole lot of defense that went on, so we'll see. Well, it could be the first match of the season. As for blocks, Baylor had 8 blocks, while Kansas had 6. 3 were solo blocks, while 6 were block assists, which 2 block assists equals 1 full block. So that's your little volleyball mathematics. I forgot to talk about service aces. Both teams had 5 service aces. I didn't really talk about a whole lot about those service aces and service errors from all the matches that went on. So I'll make up for that in the near future. But still, I go by what I said about every one of those matches. But I digress on that. But either way, Kansas winning really was a shocker. Kansas beating Baylor was a big shocker. As now Kansas goes to Texas this week, and if Kansas could pull off another upset, if they could at least take one game from Texas, that could put them in the driver's seat to possibly winning the Big 12. As for Texas, they swept, like I said, Texas swept their 2 matchups against Oklahoma. The first match they won in 3, and then the second match they won in 4, which is what I actually predicted. I think I predicted that. If anyone can go back and listen to that then and just prove me wrong, then and let me know. So I don't know. I think that was just an off game for Baylor, which is very concerning because I think Baylor's a much better team than what Friday showed. So we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes going forward. So Texas plays Kansas on October, they actually play Kansas tomorrow and Friday. So which is actually a good segue to preview that matchup. So let's preview some Big 12 matchups between Texas and Kansas. Kansas is coming off of a split series against Baylor, while while Texas is coming off of 2 solid wins over Oklahoma. To me, this one's kind of a no-brainer. I think Texas sends Kansas back down to earth. Nothing against Kansas, but I think Texas is just so much better. So much better in every aspect of the game. Logan Exelton is amazing. Jenna Gabriel is amazing. Their entire team, like I said last week, Texas returns a hefty amount of their players from last year. So I gotta pick Kansas, or not Kansas. I gotta pick Texas to win both those matches. It's nothing against Kansas. I think Kansas has a shot, but I think Texas is coming off of 2 solid road victories against a pretty solid Oklahoma team. And to me, I think that's what's going to propel Texas to the victory. Just because Texas is a very talented team. It's not that Kansas lacks talent, but to me, I just think Texas is just so much better. And Texas is also on their redemption tour. They lost in the Sweet 16 from last year to Louisville. Yeah, Louisville. I said this before. They lost to Louisville in the Sweet 16 last year, and I think they'll be the first to say that they were highly disappointed in the fact that they lost in the round of 16 as opposed to losing in like the Final Four. Because I think Texas could have maybe given Stanford a run for their money, but it just wasn't the case. I definitely think Texas is better than Minnesota, that's for sure. Especially from last year. I think Texas is better than Minnesota this year. But I digress. So this week is going to answer a whole lot of questions between Texas and Kansas. Is Kansas the real deal? And can Texas keep up the momentum swing? So that's my little preview. I definitely think that Logan Exelton is going to be an X factor for Texas, as well as Jenna Gabriel, because she's a nifty little setter despite being like 5. I think she's nowhere near 6 feet. And Marcus says, do you think they can't beat Texas A&M? I assume you mean Texas can't beat at Texas A&M. Of course I think that Texas can beat Texas A&M. So just because Texas A&M is a good NCAA volleyball team from the SEC, but I think Texas is this Texas team is a whole lot stronger, and I think this Texas team, to me, is just set the tone this past weekend. A&M does benefit from having a stronger conference. They play teams like Florida, Kentucky, Missouri, Georgia. That whole SEC is crawling with talented teams. Like, there was a reason why Texas A&M did make the Sweet 16 last year. The problem with A&M is that they're not quite on the level. I think if they didn't have to contend with all these other teams, I think maybe they could make a deeper NCAA run. But unfortunately, with the NCAA being pushed back to January and then all the way to April and all those other teams catching up, it just makes me wonder, how is Texas A&M going to go from fall to probably a little bit of a break to like winter? I don't even know how Texas A&M is going to handle the winter. Are they just going to schedule NCAA non-conference matchups between non-conference teams, or are they just going to finish off the SEC? Like, again, the SEC is only 8 games, 8 conference games in the fall, and then going forward. So, to me, I think if Texas played Texas A&M, I'd probably give Texas the edge and probably pick them to win in 4. As for my predictions for Texas and Kansas, I'll probably say Texas over Kansas in 3 the first match, and then Texas over Kansas in 4 the second match. If not vice versa. But I pretty much have Texas beating Kansas. Like, I just think that I think it might have been a little bit of beginner's luck for Kansas, especially since Baylor has so much pressure on them. Like Baylor has a lot to prove this year, because they made the NCAA Final Four. That now their big challenge is they gotta top that, which would mean make it to the NCAA Finals, which they haven't done. Like, last year was actually the first time the Baylor made the NCAA Final Four, which is kind of surprising. So either way, I still have Texas winning both of those matches. Uh-oh. Okay. So I don't know. Hopefully everything is still good, because my whole thing, it looks like my connection kind of dropped for a little bit, but hopefully we're all good. So anyway, back to Syracuse and Notre Dame. Now, Syracuse is going to have to play out of their comfort zone when playing Notre Dame. I think Syracuse has the potential of beating Notre Dame, but you remember, they return, and this is kind of the tale of two teams. Notre Dame and Syracuse both have a lot in common. Both teams return a lot of their players. Of the 13 players that Syracuse had last year, they returned 11 out of those 13 this year. And a lot of those players are kind of, I won't say this in a negative way, but they're international players, because I think a lot of their players from this year have last names, have interesting last names, such as Mariana Markova, Elena Karakasi, Ella Sada, Polina Shemanova, Lulia Yastrab, Abby Cassiano, and Naomi. I think Naomi Franco is like one of the non-international players. As I'm actually gonna look up to see where all those players from Syracuse are from. Let's go down the list. I'm actually on the Syracuse website right now. So Mariana Markova is from Russia. Elena Karakasi is from Greece. Ella Sada is from Israel. Polina Shemanova is from Russia. Lulia Yastrab is from the Ukraine. Okay, Abby Cassiano is not an international player. She's from Florida, so shame on me. My bad. And then Victoria Lakmanchuk is from the Ukraine as well. So I think that's almost half of their players are from outside the U.S. But still, that's still pretty impressive for Syracuse to have talented players like that. To have players like that pull off 2 upsets over Pitt. So as for Notre Dame, I definitely think this one's kind of going to be close. I think Notre Dame can beat Syracuse both times, because now Syracuse has to go from I think New York to South Bend, and Notre Dame's a tough place to win at. And Notre Dame has proven that they are hungry, and with the amount of starters they return, I think Notre Dame takes both games. I think the first game Notre Dame wins in 4, and then the second game Notre Dame wins in 5. But they surely cannot underestimate Syracuse. Syracuse beating Pitt twice, with one of which being a sweep, is a huge deal. So honestly, I think that's what Notre Dame just has to run their game plan. They have to outblock and outdig their opponent, and they gotta serve pretty well, which is what Syracuse did over Pitt in the 5-set game. As for the other game in which Pitt won or which Syracuse won in 3, Syracuse out-aced Pitt 4-1, and they had fewer errors. Pitt's serving was really what killed them. Pitt missing a whole bunch of serves really hurt them in their games against Syracuse, which to me, I think that's also another reason why Pitt got hurt. And big shout to Larry B saying congratulations on 1 year for Set Point. I appreciate it, Larry B. And great job with your show. I don't know if you're still continuing, but you do a great job with your show as well. So thank you, Larry B, for everything, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to do Set Point. So I definitely appreciate you, man. So yeah, you're just in time to actually, as I'm just breaking down this whole Notre Dame and Syracuse matchup. To me, I think Notre Dame can win both games against Syracuse. Syracuse was very amazing last week beating Pitt, but I think Syracuse gets dragged back down to earth. I think Notre Dame just has too much firepower in their arsenal. If Notre Dame can beat Syracuse twice, I think they may be in good shape to when it comes to the ACC, because they do have some more challenging matchups ahead. But setting the tone early would really mean a whole lot for Notre Dame, especially with that much talent on that team. Like they can only keep getting better as the season progresses. So we'll have to keep an eye on Notre Dame, especially if Pierre Moss is around. And I think this Notre Dame team is for real. I just hope they don't prove me wrong, because if they do, then I will be disappointed. But if that's not the case, then I still stand by what I said, and I think Notre Dame can win both of their matchups. So looking at the rest of Notre Dame's schedule, they have after they play Syracuse, they have a bye week, and then they play Pitt at South Bend, and then they close out the season against Boston College. Yes, I said it like that. Boston College. Syracuse, on the other hand, has like the gauntlet schedule of the ACC. They had Pitt the first week. They have Notre Dame this week. Then they have Louisville. Then they're at Louisville next week, and then they close out the season at home against Boston College. So Syracuse has proven that they're not afraid of any challenge. So honestly, I think Syracuse has what it takes. Then you also have to watch out for Duke as well. I'm surprised at why Duke has 6 games. Like, let's say Duke goes 6-0. Like I said earlier, let's say Duke goes 6-0, and then let's say Notre Dame goes 7-0. How are they going to have the tiebreaker between Notre Dame and Duke? Like, no. That, like, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. I cannot believe this. I can't believe what I'm seeing. And apparently Duke and North Carolina State played earlier than all these other teams, which is kind of surprising, but it's whatever. Now, before I close up on the ACC, I actually do need to make note of one team that actually pulled off a win, which, remember how I said Virginia Tech was chosen to finish last in the ACC? Well, Virginia Tech actually upset North Carolina. Ben Sutterth, I don't know if you're still in the chat room, but North Carolina lost to Virginia Tech, the team that was slated to finish dead last in the ACC. I think it's safe to say North Carolina is not a volleyball school in terms of women's volleyball. So, but I digress on that. Like, to me, the more important thing is Syracuse and Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame has something going here, and I think they're going to send Syracuse crashing down. But if Syracuse does beat Notre Dame at least one more time, I think that could set them up for something special, because they'll have at least one win on Notre Dame. And let's say Notre Dame goes 6-1, and then Syracuse goes 7-1. I don't know how that would work in terms of tiebreaker or making up matches, but I will say this: that would be hugely beneficial for Syracuse. Like, I would hope the ACC does figure out what's going to happen with all these games that got postponed, or why some of these teams are playing 6 conference games as opposed to another conference team that's playing 8, or another team playing 7. Again, it's just food for thought on my part, so I don't know. I digress, though, but we'll see. Like, at least we get more NCAA volleyball to come in April. Like, in April will be the NCAA Women's Volleyball Championships. Like, again, it's going to be a shortened field. It's a field of 48 as opposed to a field of 64, which is going to be really fascinating. I was thinking they'd maybe shrink it down to 32, but that would mean that every team has to win conference. Otherwise, they don't go to the postseason. Like, every conference team would win, which that wouldn't be fair. Like, I'm glad they put it to 48 teams. Otherwise, then we'd have a huge NIVC, which also makes me wonder, what's going to happen with the NIVC? Are they just not going to have it, or will they have it with a lot of talented teams playing in it? Because we could see a very, very fascinating NIVC, which, for those of you that don't know, it means National Invitational Volleyball Championship. It's kind of like the NIT when it comes to women's volleyball, but again, I digress. So, I think that's going to be it for the ACC and when it comes to previewing. So, now before I send you all on your way, it's time for a little story time with Teran on how Set Point got to be. So gather around, kids, grab your snacks, grab your drinks, because it is time for story time with your boy, Teran Rodriguez. So, when it comes to I already told this story when it came to Set Point, or when it came to the 50th episode special, but I will say this, Set Point, it took me a while to get used to doing Set Point. I was used to being a co-host on certain shows. Like, I started off being the co-host for Bases Loaded, and then eventually I moved on from that, and then I was Larry's co-host for the Defining Moment in 3 and Out College Edition. Larry says NIT, not invited tournament. Wow. Wow. That's cold right there. Like, that deserves the laugh button right there. But not only that, we're not just going to give you the laugh button, but we're also going to give you the Kawhi laugh as well. So, the not invited tournament. That is way too funny. Wait, that's what NIT stands for? I thought it stood for National Invitational Tournament. Like, I didn't know that's what it stood for. Like, that's crazy. What about the CIT? Like, what's that stand for? Like, does it stand for couldn't be invited tournament? Like, is couldn't and be like one whole word? Like, that's just food for thought on my part. But I didn't know that's what not invited tournament stands for. No, and then Larry says, no, it's not with a capital N-O-T invited tournament. Oh my god, I can't believe that. That's basically a kick to the face right there. Like imagine being a team that actually had high expectations and not making the NCAA tournament, and then having to play in the NIT, which is the not invited tournament. Oh my gosh. It's a good thing the NIVC has their own acronym. It's the National Invitational Volleyball Tournament. Volleyball Championship. So, oh my gosh. But that's crazy, man. Like, the not invited tournament. That's crazy. That deserves one more Kawhi laugh, though. Oh my gosh. Okay, so anyway, back to what I was getting at when it came to Set Point. It took me a while to get used to being a full host when it came to doing Set Point, because I just didn't. I mean, I had experience being a podcast host by myself, but when it came to doing my own thing, it just felt weird and awkward not being a co-host. And it took me a while. It took me growing pains, because I admit I wasn't really the best host, and I think many people at IE Sports Radio can attest to this, that I'm a little bit more, I'm more improved than I was back when I started. So, just my take. I digress on that. But anyway, it took me a while for me to get used to for me doing Set Point by myself, and for me having my own podcast by myself. So, to me, I think it was a little tough. And Marcus says practice makes perfect. And Marcus is the wise one right there. Marcus has the best sayings ever, because he one time told me, a house is not built overnight. And I couldn't agree to that statement more. And I couldn't agree to practice makes perfect even more. So I had to start pretty much like preparing who I'm going to be talking about when it came to recapping matches, and who I'm going to be previewing, and who stood out, and who had this milestone, and who had that milestone. And I also kind of got out of the habit of doing shows on Saturday. Like, to me, the noob part of me decided to do shows on Saturday. Just to recap what happened this past weekend, the Friday of when every matchup happened, and to basically have more story time with Teran on how I did when it came to writing for the school newspaper when it came to women's volleyball matches. So, yeah. But as Marcus said, practice makes perfect, and it was definitely a learning lesson. Like, I had to pretty much fall down more times and then get up more times than not. So, if that made any sense. Like, you fall down 9 times, then you get up 8, or then you get up 10. So, yeah. So, yeah, it just took me a while to get used to doing set point, and then it kind of became second nature to me. Like, it just felt more natural. And then as the NCAA tournament, women's volleyball tournament came along, I pretty much tried to get more involved with making bold predictions and just seeing which team is which, and especially when it came to conference tournaments. Like, some of these conferences, like, I didn't even know. Like, the Big East tournament, I didn't know the Big East had a conference tournament. Like, I didn't know, like, a majority of these other conferences had conference tournaments. Like, I just wonder why there's no Pac-12 tournament or no Big West tournament or anything like that. But either way, I had to pretty much brush up on more of these other conferences just because I can't just talk about the Pac-12, the Big Ten, the Big 12, the ACC, the SEC, the Big East, the American Athletic Conference, the Big West, etc., etc., etc. I had to pretty much learn more about the other conferences and what all these other teams are doing. Like, the Ivy League, was actually one of the more interesting leagues, considering Princeton and Yale tied for first place, and then Princeton won the Ivy League tournament. So that was quite fascinating. So, and eventually I kept and Larry, oh my God, Larry says the CIT, Crappy Invitational Tournament. Well, there it is. There it is. That would pretty much make sense, because the not invited tournament, like again, at least volleyball has their own acronym when it comes to women's volleyball for, like, that type of tournament, the National Invitational Volleyball Championship. So, but that good jokes, Larry. Good jokes. I'll give you some sort of applause. Okay, it's not that funny, though. Anyway, back to the story. So yeah, as soon as women's volleyball season done, I jumped straight into men's volleyball season. And I kind of did so in the worst way possible. Again, I had my show on a Saturday night at 7 p.m. Not a smart idea, Teran. Just because most people are asleep on the East Coast, and not everyone is really watching. Not really anyone is listening to, like, volleyball podcasts at night. They're probably just watching the news, or they're watching college football. I think I did my NCAA men's volleyball season opener during all the bowl games, which was like, oops. Yeah, but again, you gotta live and learn. Like, note to self, don't do shows when it comes to, unless you have to, don't do shows when there's, like, college football, and especially don't do shows on Sundays, because that's when especially when the NFL's going on. So, just my take. Again, these are the thoughts and opinions of myself, and just in case the Fun Police is listening, there's a description down below. So anyway, I think some of you might know this because I talked about it in the 50th episode special. I just hit a rough patch one day. Like, not a whole lot of people were kind of tuning in. Like, not too many people were tuning in. But as Marcus said, a house is not built. And as I was just pondering, I was like, I don't know, man. Like, why do people just not want to listen to me, man? Like, are they just not interested in volleyball? and I was just bummed. I kind of hit a low point when it came to doing set point, and then the inner me and myself said, "Don't give up, Teran. Like, there's got to be some people that want to listen to set point." And sure enough, I just kept on pressing. I picked myself up yet again, and I kept doing set point because even when I had to deal with school and when it came to my internship, when it came to covering lacrosse games and whatnot, so yeah, it was tough considering I had to juggle a whole lot of things, and I had to change my show times like I changed my socks, but it was still worth it. Like, I was able to keep the train going. Unfortunately, COVID became a thing and canceled everything volleyball-wise. It canceled high school volleyball, junior college men's volleyball, junior college beach volleyball, NCAA volleyball on the men's side, and NCAA beach volleyball. It was not fun. Like, I was like, well, what's going to happen to set point now? It's like, and I had two options. Put set point on hiatus and wait till it comes back, or continue to do set point by making things work and getting creative. You know what I chose. I chose option number 2. I kept set point going, and I basically had to do recruiting class. I did a recruiting class episode. I did a postseason award special or conference award special and whatnot, and the big thing that saved set point from COVID was that I was able to have guests. I had a plethora of guests, such as Alan Knight from Long Beach State Men's Volleyball, Kevin Birch from Ohio State Men's Volleyball, Travis Turner from Orange Coast College Men's Volleyball, Ryan Windish from Irvine Valley College Men's Volleyball. And then I also had high school volleyball coaches like Craig Pizzanti of Huntington Beach, the high school coach of Josh Tuaniga and TJ DeFalco, Dave Huber, who's a good friend of mine who coaches at Los Alamitos. And I managed to have 2 guests for the 50th episode special of Set Point. So, and the fact that I made it through COVID and I didn't have to take any weeks off despite everything being canceled is just amazing. Like, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe I was able to get through COVID season and then keep set point going without taking a hiatus or whatnot. And keep in mind, in the summer, I also had a summer job that I had to work with as well, considering I needed to make my money and my paper, and for Marcus's sake, to get some tacos on Taco Tuesday. But that's besides the point. I digress on that. So the fact that I was able to keep set point going through COVID season and through the summer. Like, the summer's the toughest part, considering all that's really there to talk about is the AVP, and the AVP canceled most of its events as well, except for 3. And Marcus says, and margaritas. Yes, tacos and margaritas as well, when it comes to making my money. So, yeah, but the fact that the AVP had only 3 beach volleyball tournaments this season, it was tough. It was tough to scrap together content, but I was able to scrap together guests. I can't believe I was able to scrap together so many guests when it came to set point during the summer. Like, as a matter of fact, I think I'm tapped out on guests for the most part. Like, I think and the worst part is that most of my guests, my potential guests that I was going to have possibly are probably back in school, or they're back coaching, or they're back doing their everyday routine. I think one of my potential guests has a photography company and whatnot, and he's more busy than ever. So, but it's whatever. Honestly, like, I was able to have so many guests. I think I had over 20 guests on set point. Like, matter of fact, I'm actually gonna go to my notes and see all my guests that I've had, and I'm actually gonna read down the notes of all my guests from set point. I had Matt Szabo, Andrew Turner, Blake Ludez, Reese Klassen, Mark Lindahl, Steve Astor, Alan Knife, Travis Turner, Jack Stafford, who was actually my co-host for a little while, McKay Smith, Tom Pestalacci, Matt Marujo, Brad Rostratter, Ryan Windish, Nick Amato, Kevin Birch, Dave Huber, Craig Pizzanti, Jake Nunaviller, Dalton Ammerman, Clay Webb, and Hunter Dickey as my guests. So that's 22 guests right there. If I miscounted, then just let me know. But I'm pretty sure that was 22. The fact that I was able to get, the fact that 20 out of those 22 guests came during COVID season is a complete miracle, honestly. And I still couldn't believe I was able to get through COVID season. And then a lot of moments happened for Set Point. Like I surpassed 50 episodes. I surpassed 1,000 downloads on Spreaker. And I'm still going with it with a Set Point, no matter what the circumstances. Sure, not every NCAA volleyball team is back, but the fact that we have NCAA volleyball right now is what's keeping the show going. And there may be a little bit of a hiatus, considering I think most of these conferences are going to be ending in, conference play is going to be ending in like October, maybe November, but Set Point is still going to find some way to keep it going. Like, I've said this before, I want to keep Set Point going until it reaches like 100, maybe even 200 episodes. And it's quite, and I don't know. I don't know if there's another podcast that has like over 100 or 200 episodes. Either way, it would just be something special, because I think volleyball is not that, it doesn't get a whole lot of love, just because it's mainly a college sport, and we don't get to see volleyball on like ESPN or ESPN2. We do get to see volleyball on ESPN Plus, but that's pretty much it. There's not, and also the Olympics as well, but still. Either way, that's kind of how Set Point came to be, and me maturing and learning from my mistakes and just finding ways to get better is just something that's definitely benefited me as a host. And being a host has kind of taught me a lot, as I've learned to be organized and when to plan out my day and when to hopefully get myself together. And being a schedule for guests is still taught me how to organize and communicate with guests, and how to just reach out when you have no other guests and you still have to wonder who's going to be my guest for this week, or when does this person go back to school, or when does this person go back to work and whatnot. So organization has kind of been a plus for me when it came to being the host for Set Point. So other than the fact that volleyball doesn't get a whole lot of love, I'm still trying to do all that I can to put volleyball on the map and to help grow the game. Because if we continue to grow the game, volleyball will not be left behind like some of these other sports. And volleyball is a unique sport. I think it's one of the more tougher sports, and hopefully everything will be back to normal, or at least some sort of normal, once we get like a vaccine, or once we get like everything squared away, and just as long as people are obeying the guidelines. But that's just my thing. And I think on that note, we're actually going to wrap up Set Point. And thank you all for joining me for the 1-year episode of Set Point. This volleyball host has been through a lot with Set Point, from being a noob and copying other people's catchphrases, to surviving COVID-19, to having 22 guests on his show, to having a 50th episode special, to having a Season 1 and Season 2 premiere, or Season 1 end, to basically having everything just thrown at me and overcoming all odds. I can say that I survived COVID-19, and Set Point survived COVID-19, and it is a full 1 year old. If I had a cake, I definitely would be feeding it to Set Point. Except I'd probably be eating that whole cake right now. So I'm not going to overinflate my ego or give myself a big fat head, because my head's already big as is. I need a haircut, by the way. But on that note, and thank you, Larry B, for telling me that thank you for being a part of the IE Sports Radio family. It is my pleasure, Larry B. I'm happy to be a part of the IE Sports Radio family, and thanks for all of your support, and thanks for all your pointers, and for keeping me up despite all that's happened with COVID and everything. So But it is time. It is that time, everybody. And Marcus pretty much said it in the chat room. It is time to drop the beat, because I'm about to dip like a banana in chocolate. You feel me? Thank you all for tuning in to the 1-year anniversary special of Set Point. I couldn't have been more appreciative of the support of everyone that's tuned in from past to present. It really means a lot. Thank you to Ben Sutter III for joining me in the chat room. Thank you to Andrew Hagenbaugh for joining me in the chat room. Thank you to Marcus for being such a great, loyal listener to Set Point, because he and I are pretty much like brothers. Thank you to Larry B for everything. Thank you for teaching me the ways. I appreciate everyone who's tuned in from episode 1 all the way to episode 57, and I'm going to keep this train going. So, for everyone here at iSports Radio, this is Teran Rodriguez signing off. I'll see you all Friday for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. Have a great night, everybody. Peace and blessings.